Well, at first, it was every day I would wake up and think, oh my God, I have ALS. In fact, it was kind of strange. I would often dream and have vivid dreams, and I would be walking again. And sometimes I would be explaining to people, well, I have ALS, but usually I can't walk, but today seems to be a good day. And then I'd wake up from that dream, kind of wake up to a nightmare instead of vice versa. I think I guess it's permeated now because I don't wake up and think, oh my God, I have ALS. It's just, this is the day.
My friend Ted has amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The Ice Bucket Challenge, that was for ALS. Ted was diagnosed with ALS 2 years ago. There is no cure. Life expectancy varies. It's 3 to 5 years or up to 8 years, depending on the type of ALS. Ted is 56. His wife Robin and my wife Eileen have been best friends since grade school. Ted, Robin, and Eileen all grew up together. Ted and Robin have 3 kids, adults now, Hannah and Jeremy in their 20s, same age as our 2 kids, and their youngest, Stephen, is 19. This podcast is about Ted and his family. It's about how they're dealing with something unimaginable until you wake up one morning and your muscles aren't working properly. How you deal with a future that's been taken away from you. A future that's narrowed down to this.
It's just, this is the day.
My friend Ted has amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
ALS is relentless, but it's slow. I shouldn't say super slow because some people are diagnosed in April and they're dead in August. But on average, if you're the 3 to 5 years, it's very rarely that you're going to wake up and all of a sudden you can't do something you did yesterday. It's just going to get a little bit more difficult, a little more difficult, a little more difficult. It's one of the frustrations of the disease that you don't know what you're going to lose and when, and if it's gone forever or coming back. And another problem with ALS is you could just have a slow progression, right? So, everyone's different. I don't know what they're doing down there in the basement, but it doesn't sound good. How's it going downstairs, Hannah?
Great. Anna's moved in. She's got her bed. Vishal helped her set up her bed. So that banging was...
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wondered if that was it.
Yeah. And then I was like, guys, I'm building upstairs. I probably should hang on for that. Anyway, so that's done. And there's a pizza party downstairs. So
This is typical of Robin and Ted's house. I've been coming here for 30 years, and it's always a little, truth be told, hectic. Things don't always go quite the way you expect. There are people coming and going, and someone putting a bed together in the basement this day is a rather tame interruption. Years ago, when the kids were in grade school, we arrived for dinner to discover Ted had installed a zip line in the basement. The kids were flying over the basement floor on a wire and pulley, propelling themselves from the top of the stairs, and with nowhere to go really, crashing into some padding against the wall at the other end of the basement. The kids loved it. As we sat in the kitchen upstairs while Robin prepared dinner, our conversation was accented by the steady wham, wham, wham of 12-year-old bodies slamming into the padding on the wall at the end of the basement. Nothing unusual, perfectly normal, just a typical day at Robin and Ted's. All this in their 1912 heritage house, immaculately restored by Ted, who learned, among other things, how to build to match 100-year-old cabinetry in the pantry and steam and bend cedar shakes, all while traveling over 100,000 miles a year for his job, which entailed visiting clients across the U.S. and the Caribbean. In fact, it was on one of these weekly business trips that he first realized something was wrong.
So I was at a business meeting in Chicago, January 2017, and I walked to the train station, the L, to find out where the nearest one was so I could have it mapped out for the next morning. And on the way back, my foot sort of dropped. So it wasn't lifting properly, kind of dragging on the ground a bit. And of course I was very concerned. And I came back and it did kind of go away. And then I came back and when I was flying, I was still flying quite a bit then. I got off a plane in Denver, and it felt like I was wearing chaps, so it was hard to move my hips. But all through that spring and summer, I still continued working. So I did the siding, the whole length of the house, about 10 feet by 50 feet. I steamed built a little steamer so I could steam the cedar shakes, so they'd bend out or flare at the bottom. And I rebuilt the bathroom up in the attic, put a shower up there because it was such a pain in the butt to have to traipse all the way down to the basement. So I was still doing that, even though symptoms were getting worse and worse, but I kind of was able to work around it. But in that spring, I had mentioned to one of Robin's, the doctor she worked for, he was the head of cardiac surgery. I mentioned this to him, and he said, a difference in gait like that is serious. You need to have that looked at. And he referred me to a neurologist. So I went to the neurologist. He watched the way I walk, and it wasn't too bad at that time. These things come on slowly, so you don't realize, at first how much difficulty you're having walking. But anyway, so we watched that. He sent me for a neck MRI, hoping to find compression, but there was none. And then he sent me back for the head MRI. And when they did the head MRI, I phoned, again, Dr. Hayden, Robin's boss, because he got the report right away. And he read it out to me, and he said that there was this hyper intensity on the T2 radial flare or something like that, which could be a normal brain, but it could also be a sign of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And Bob read it out, and I said, "Oh, does that mean I have ALS?" And he said he hadn't put two together. He was just reading it out. He said, "Oh, yeah, that might be." And I knew right then, it was June. I knew right then I had it because obviously I have all the symptoms. And I was still hoping, believe it or not, I hoped it was some syphilis, neurosyphilis. I just clung to that hope that maybe it was something that had been dormant for 30 years and now it had come up. And I held on to that for quite a while because, of course, you take some penicillin and you're good again, right? But that was not to be.
Ted's wife, Robin, comes from a medical family. Her dad was a GP and her mom a nurse.
The thing is, when we received the formal diagnosis, I already knew deep down. I mean, it was a blow to have my deep fear confirmed, but I had already suspected it.
I think I remember you telling Eileen on the phone.
Did I?
I think you did, and I said, but if they don't have a diagnosis yet, so they shouldn't go there right away. But you just knew.
I knew. I mean, this foot drag, his knee hyperextending backwards, and most concerning that he couldn't walk in a straight line. He lurched as if he was drunk. And anyway, so he phoned me, and he was just desperate. Hit the shock and what's the word? Lack of comprehension, like the disbelief, the shock. I could hear it in his voice. He said, "Come home right away." So yeah, I remember feeling horror, but not surprise. And still a lot of disbelief, even to this day. If I allow myself to sort of let my mind just roam freely, I will feel overcome with disbelief.
ALS patients are extraordinarily nice. This is well documented. I mean, there's papers published on it.
Dr. Andrew Eisen is considered a world leader in the clinical neurophysiology of ALS. He's a neurologist and professor emeritus at the University of British Columbia, and one of the founders of the ALS Society of BC.
I mean, like there's always a few, but the vast majority are extraordinary people. And so it's actually not as difficult as people think to look after them.
So I understand that even now ALS sometimes is difficult to diagnose, or tricky to diagnose. Maybe not for you, but does it get misdiagnosed still?
Well, it does in the community. I mean, because the problem is family doctors, they see 1 or 2 patients in their whole life. So, and it's such a rare orphan disease that there's no reason for them to think about it. And community neurologists may see, 5, 6 patients a year, 7 patients a year, which isn't enough. When you've seen enough pink elephants with 5 legs, you recognize a pink. I mean, this is not boasting, but I can see an ALS patient. I walk through the office now. It takes me the whole of 5 minutes. There are a few when it's early and subtle that you need to be very careful with. And I always say there's one thing worse than misdiagnosing ALS, and that is to diagnose it when you don't have it. And that's an awful thing to do. I've done it. I've done it a few times, unquestionably. But you don't want to do that. It takes about 14 months for a patient with ALS to get from their family doctor to an ALS clinic. And the delay is awful, and the reason for the delay is because people get muddled up. It presents in so many different ways. If they have speech trouble, they go and see an ENT specialist. If they start with walking difficulty, they go and see a rehab guy or something. So they go and see all the wrong, and they mess around. These people investigate, and you end up spending all this time going around in circles, unfortunately. And I'm not convinced that problem is soluble. I mean, we keep saying we need to raise awareness of ALS, but you're never going to teach a family practitioner about ALS. Why would they be interested to see one case in their life? They're not, it's like many other rare diseases. So I think one has to accept that to some extent. But there's a whole other issue that's more important that will counterbalance that as far as I'm concerned.
And what is that?
Well, so I'm sort of early on in this, but one thing we've realized now, and I've been a great proponent of this, ALS does not begin the day you have problems. It begins decades before. We know now, for instance, in Parkinson's, that the earliest features of Parkinson's probably go back 20 years before you have clinical Parkinson's. The same is true of Alzheimer's, and the same is true of ALS. So the whole secret for the future is to try and discover early markers, both clinical and biochemical and so on, and radiological markers, very early in one's life. And that's how you're going to stop the disease, or at least stop its progression. So whether people know it once you've got it really isn't terribly important.
March 30th, and we are visiting, March 29th, and we are visiting Dr. Webster, respirologist in the U.S.
I've given Ted a pocket recorder to use like an audio journal. His son Jeremy has taken him to a specialist appointment. Ted's concerned about recent test results regarding his lung capacity.
I'm still at 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm worried about this kind of precipitous drop.
In the volume.
Yeah.
So you're still normal, but not as good as you were.
Yeah, but it just seems like last time I was, 120?
So last time you blew out 5.02 liters, and this time you only blew out 4.32. So you are correct. You have lost 700 cc's.
Right.
So then in someone with ALS, my question always is that because you can't seal the tube, that little tube they put in your mouth, or is it true muscle weakness?
Yeah, and I mean, with my type of ALS, I wonder if it's spasticity in my diaphragm. Is that possible?
It is possible.
Yeah.
Anything is possible in ALS. Yeah. So don't panic about one number. Got to take the whole picture.
Yeah. But I just think if I lost 20 percentage points since the last time I blew, does that mean I lose another 20 next time? And
Nope,
20
you might be
after
the
that?
same. You might be the same. It depends why you're less.
Yeah.
If I could say this, okay, you've lost that, then next time you're going to have lost that much, I wouldn't have to do these over and over again, right?
Yeah.
But because there's so many factors that play into the numbers that we get, you have to follow it and take it as part of the whole picture. It's the problem with pulmonary physiology. It's all ability. It's not like cardiology where you lie there and they stick leads on your chest and look at the rhythm, right? Here you have to be able to put in effort. You have to be able to seal the spirometer. You have to be able to follow the directions. So there's all of these factors that go into the numbers that we get out of it. So you follow it over time and follow you clinically over time.
Right. Okay.
Got it? Do not worry about one number in isolation. Let's look at the big picture.
Yeah, okay. Give that a try.
All right. Okay. So back to
So is the breathing the biggest worry right now, Ted?
Yeah. Yeah, just because it takes it out of my control. I have a show. Hey, good. Yeah, the breathing is, just because I can't control it. And, I don't know if you ever had the wind knocked out of you and you're lying there and you're gasping for air and it's just terrifying, right? And I just don't ever want to be in that place, to be lying in bed terrified because you can't breathe, but just getting enough to keep you alive. I mean, that's unthinkable for me. I think, I can't remember if it was one of these CBC personalities who was dying of cancer, and he said, people say about how I battled cancer, but really I just lay there. I guess it's kind of the same with me. It's kind of like, it's just this next thing is going to happen. There's not really anything I can do about it. So that day that I had that foot drop, it could have been a heart attack, it could have been a stroke, and I could be gone. So this has just given me some extra time. Not the greatest time, mind you, but it's given me some extra time. And I was just mentioning that and how I'm just going to make the best of what I can. And someone said about how her husband passed away from the disease and felt like his future had been stolen from him and he would have done this and that and the other. But she said, she knew him all his life and he wasn't the type of person to do anything differently anyway. So, and that kind of resonated with me, and I thought, I'm not going to say my life has been stolen from, or this time has been stolen from me. I'm just going to move on. This is what's going to happen, whether I get frustrated or angry or not. I also, I have a lot of responsibility because everyone in my family are looking to me for how they deal with things. So again, if I curl up in a ball, and I'm not going to say I haven't been depressed, because I have gone through depression. Usually when something new happens, something I never saw coming, never imagined, maybe I did and now it's here. So, I can go through a little bit of depression, but, it's important, a few things are important, that I have to set the tone for how my family deals with this. Again, if I was curled up in a ball, they would feel terrible and wouldn't know what to do. And I also have to have days like that too, because that gives them permission to have days like that as well. I guess it's a little bit difficult to articulate, trying to just make them understand I know what's happening and I know this is what the hand I've been dealt, But, let's try and still make the best of it and enjoy our time together. When Robin's mother was dying, I was in the room with her alone in the palliative care, and she could almost not speak at that time. And I promised her I would look after her babies. And I could see she was just how she really wanted to say something, but she couldn't. And, when I say look after her babies, I mean Robin, Hannah, but, the boys too. So, do what you can.
Coming up on the next episode of My Friend Ted.
So on Monday, December 17th, 1973, bank robbers broke into our house. We came into the basement where my father and I slept, woke us up, and this was like 5:30 in the morning, and their plan was to go in my father's Volkswagen camper down to the Lougheed Mall, open up the bank, and take the money.
That's coming up next time. Thanks to Dr. Andrew Eisen in Vancouver, Dr. Sheila Webster in Westminster, and to Robin, Hannah, Jeremy, Stephen, and, of course, my friend Ted. I'm Robert Wee Matt. My Friend Ted is produced by Bigsnit Media in Vancouver.